And what does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean to turn my will and my life over to the care of God? I'm just going to pull out the original manuscript quickly again. Sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to talk because I'm still looking for it, and I can't really find it because the original manuscript that I printed isn't like it is in the book. But basically, I know basically what it says. It said, well, here's the how and the why of it. First of all, it says quit fucking playing God. It doesn't work, period. Next, hereafter in this drama of life, God is going to be the director. You are his agent. And then it says, get that simple relationship straight. You know, in the big book, it softens it up. But in the original manuscript, it's very clear. We got to get the simple relationship straight. And then as I take this idea, this concept that God is now the Father and I'm his child, I now work for God. This is the concept of the new and triumphant arch which I will pass to freedom. This is the keystone. So when I first make this decision to turn my will and my life over, I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't even know what that means. But it tells me in the book that this is the keystone, this concept, that will free me in my life. And it will free me in all parts of my life if I learn how to turn my will and my life over. And the theoretical part of turning my will and my life over is that I just intellectualize and I decide when I'm actually doing that and when I'm not. And the theoretical idea that the big book has of God is not what I'm talking about or not what this study is talking about. All through the original manuscript, it talks about rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions, right? Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to follow directions. And it talks about directions all through this. Having had a spiritual experience as the result of this course of action, we tried to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Our description of the alcoholic chapter to the agnostic and our personal adventures before and after have been designed to sell you 3 pertinent ideas. A, that your alcoholic cannot manage your own life. B, that probably no human power can relieve your alcoholism. And C, that God can and will. Period. Period. If you are convinced of this, you are now at step 3, which is you made a decision. It's a launching point, step 3. This decision to turn your will and your life over to God as you understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? And if you are not convinced, you ought to reread this book to this point or else throw it the fuck away. Very clear. The first requirement is that you see that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So like I said before, I got to be convinced that my life run by me is not really successful. And if I can get myself to a place where I'm convinced that my life run by me doesn't usually work out, then I can move on to really trying to turn this over to God. You know? Anyway, so that the step 3 decision is very, very important, but it's only the launching pad. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. But relieve me of the bondage of me. Relieve me of the bondage of self, because that is what my problem is. So that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties. My difficulties are my defects of character. Why am I reading this right now? Because this decision is what the whole fucking program's about. Where does this relinquishment of my difficulties come? It comes in step 6, which is why to me step 6 is the most important step to attaining true humility, which is attained in step 7. Take away my difficulties that cause my difficulties in my life is essentially what we're talking about. That victory over them. Victory over these difficulties. Sounds like there's a fight. Where's the fight? Well, it's not easy letting go of this shit. It's not easy fucking relinquishing my lust or underlying lust is emotional connection and companionship. I'm trying to fill something within myself through these relationships that I keep trying to cling to. Why? Because I'm a victim of a delusion. The second delusion in step 3. I'm a victim of this delusion that I can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I only manage well, if I only have the right things, if I can only place my life a certain way, I'm going to be happy and fucking satisfied. I'm a victim of that. Victim, I'm tricked or duped. Of a delusion, a lie that I continually tell myself, but when I look at the evidence, it's not really fucking truth. But I believe it, no matter what you tell me. I got to smash that. That I can rest means pry, snatch, grab, take out of life. Happiness and satisfaction out of this world. If I only manage it well. I'm the fucking actor. I'm going to try to manipulate and manage and twist and arrange everything just the way I want so that I can be happy. The problem is that shit doesn't make us happy. And why do I use defects? Because I want to fucking manage this all so I can get happy. Right? I'm going to emotionally and mentally manipulate you to draw emotional love from you because I know that your love's going to make me happy. But I never get enough of it. Or it's not the right kind. Or I'm going to manipulate fucking the world to give me the best job I can get. And then I get that job and I'm pretty happy, but the shine wears off and I want a fucking raise and these people don't treat me right. They don't pay me enough. It's never enough. You know, you finally get the car of your dreams. You get the fucking brand new F-150, black on black. Then you pull up beside another one that's fucking a month newer and he has different rims that are nicer than yours, and yours is fucking piece of shit. And the shine always wears off, man. It doesn't matter. The shine always wears off. But we keep trying to fill that void in the inside with all the shit from the outside. And these are the difficulties. The difficulties are my defects of character that cause most of my difficulties in life. They cause me to fight others in my relationships. But really, I'm fighting myself always first. I'm always fighting me first. So victory over them. Where does the fight happen? It happens in step 10 because that's where step 6 is practiced. So I'm highlighting step 3 because it's the most important fucking concept of this thing. I'm highlighting step 6 because that's the understanding of surrender to God. And I'm highlighting step 10 because step 10 has my clear-cut directions of how I relinquish these difficulties. And so I'm going to finish reading this, then I'm going to read step 10 quickly, and then I'm going to bust into what we were reading last week. So take away my difficulties because God is the only one that can take these things. How do I know that? Well, I'm going to show you. Selfish self-centeredness that we think is the root of our troubles. This is what I need God to take, is this selfish self-centeredness, right? I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. I step on the toes of my fellows. You guys will retaliate. Sometimes you hurt me seemingly without provocation, but invariably I find that sometime in the past I make decisions based on self that will later place me in a position to be hurt. So we think our troubles basically are of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. And I always talk about that. These problems arise out of ourselves. They're in me. They're part of the fabric of my existence. They're deep in my subconscious. And these things come to the surface powerfully, blindly, and subtly. They will drive me and almost tyrannize my life in every chance they can. Right? Like we started the reading last week on the 4. We talked heavily about that shit. So the alcoholic is an extreme example of the self-will running riot, but he usually doesn't think so. And I told you when we read through this, that's really important because we can't see self when we're in self. You can't see the problem with the problem. He usually doesn't think so. Why? Because he rationalizes and justifies the most errant nonsense to suit his actions or his inaction. But why am I fighting everyone and everything? Because I'm acting from positions in self, but I'm masking it with good intention. But under the good intention is my self-seeking. And this gets revealed in the step 10 and through continuous persistent work. But above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. So that's not a lie. The deep-rooted part of selfishness will kill you, and I've talked about it when we did this, how it's killed some of my sponsees. And that's just the way the shit goes. And if we don't get a handle on this part of the program, we're in for a long fucking road of a lot of pain, and the wrong kind of pain. There's two kinds of pain anyway. There's the pain of growth and perseverance, or the pain of unremitting suffering through living in defects and never recognizing it. So there's going to be pain either way. Do I want happy pain, or do I want really fucking miserable pain? It's easy to take the miserable pain, and most people go that way. I'm here to implore you to take the hard road. Do what's hard. Make the rest of your life easy. Or do that easy fucking pain that's actually the harder pain and make your life fucking long and miserable. And then it says we must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there's no way of entirely getting rid of this self without God's aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore. Yeah, I've had all these moral and philosophical ideas and convictions, but I could not live up to them even though I would like to. Why? Because I'm powerless over these fucking defects. That's why I can't live up to them. I want to be all these other things, but I end up being this other thing because I'm blinded by my defects, because they drive me powerfully, blindly, and subtly, and I'm powerless over them. But God can help me if I bring them to the surface and I relinquish them and I say, God, please fucking help me. These things take away the happiness and joy in my life, and they replace it with discontentment, fear, and anxiety. So we had to have God's help. This is the how and the why. First of all, we had to quit playing God. Boom. So where does all this shit kind of commence? It commences in the step 10. That's why perseverance is the principle behind step 10. That's why victory over them. It says victory over them, meaning there's a fight. I fight through these things in step 10. That's why step 10 is perseverance. Okay? And when I start identifying step 10 in my life and working with step 10, I continue to watch for my difficulties, selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And anything that's similar to those or branches from them. And when they crop up, I ask God, boom, it's always God first, to remove it at once. And then I go to my pillar. It says, then we talk to someone fucking immediately. Why? Because I can't see the truth. And I will justify my anger. I will justify my self-righteousness. I will justify my self-pity. And I'll fucking wallow in this shit. But if I call a pillar, they can see the facts. We face the facts. We look at the truth about my situation. Not always my truth. Because my truth is always skewed by self. And then we find an object. One object is to find a damaged or unsaleable good and discard it without regret. And my pillar can see that. And they can help me with that. And they always guide me back to God. Boom, back to God. Boom, back to God. And that's where I follow the action of step 10. And then I make amends quickly if I have harmed anyone. But I'm probably not going to harm anybody because I've already went to God. I went to a pillar. I went to God again probably a couple times with the pillar. And then I don't need to make an amend. And then I see the truth and go, fuck. Dude, you're acting in total fucking fear. You made that shit up in your head. And then it says I resolutely turn my thoughts to someone I can help. Then I start praying for that person. Or I start praying for other people. And I talked about it before on my Thursday night. We pray for people for 20 or 30 or 40 seconds, not for 5 seconds or less. We try to pray longer for a person because it gets you into your subconscious, and the prayer really has a way bigger effect in the universe than a 5-second mental prayer. Because once you pray longer, the prayer goes to your heart. And it hits the universe, because the universe is infinite intelligence. My infinite intelligence comes from my heart, not from my fucking mind. So that's why step 10 is perseverance. That's why victory over them, it says that in the step 3 prayer. But really the big concept we're talking about today is step 6. Any person capable of enough willingness. Willingness is always first. Honesty. To try repeatedly, step 6, on all his faults without reservation. Has indeed come a long way. What? Fucking spiritually. Because this is where you're going to grow the most. Because this shit's hard to relinquish. But once you start following that step 10 process, you start growing, and growing. And that's the goal. That's where we get close to God. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. So I start identifying motives, not intention. and I start clearing that away, and I start getting closer to God, is exactly what that line says. And that's the truth. And when you read a bunch of different types of spiritual books, they all say the same shit that I'm saying right now and what the big book says. Everything's kind of the same. So what we did last week is we started on step 6 in the 12 and 12. We read about 2.5 pages, and then I segued into the step 4. We read a whole bunch of the step 4. Why? Because Bill tied the 4 and the 6 so tightly. It talks about what drives my defects, and we talked about the desires. If you missed this stuff last week, we're going to start on page 50, but I would implore you to start back at step 4, beginning later, tomorrow on your own time, and read up to where we're starting to tonight so you can get an idea of what drives you powerfully, blindly, and subtly. And it's your instincts, and they're worked out of whack. And then as we went through the rest of the readings, we understood the instincts and how powerful they were. Then we started looking at examples of how these instincts really fucking started to drive our lives and really affect our relationships. Because really most of our woes in our lives are based on relationships. First it's our relationship with our own self, and then our relationship with other people. But we'll usually only see that it's other people, and we'll blame them always. But really the first relationship that we're fucked with is the one in our head. Which is why I like the one line, I don't know if we read it. We're going to read it, it's coming up. The primary fact we fail to recognize is our utter inability to form a true partnership with any other human being. Because we're not fucking secure with ourselves. So how can we be secure with somebody else? And that's what this program teaches us. Teaches us how to be authentic and truthful to ourselves. And then we can be authentic and truthful to somebody else. And until we fix some of these areas, our relationship life is going to be arduous and winding and waning and painful. Because we're going to keep fucking running into the same snags. But this program and time in, first you got to stay sober, because if you don't stay sober, none of this shit fucking works. And if you don't continue to work the program after you stay sober that first year, you fucking think that this is all there is. Then alcoholism returns, and then you fucking drink again. But there's so much more benefit to learning how to turn it over to God, and that's where the freedom is, in the bondage of self. So here we go. Anyone have any questions before I rock and roll here? Okay, page 50, first full paragraph. It says, by now the newcomer has probably arrived. No, usually the newcomer has fucking not even close to arrived at that. So that was a misprint by Bill Dub. But I'll read it like it is anyway. By now the newcomer has probably arrived at the following conclusions. That his character defects, the difficulties, representing instincts gone astray, first page and a half on this chapter, have been the primary cause of his destructive drinking and failure at life. There's a lot of shit in there. The number one piece of my fucking failure at life has been my instincts gone astray. And these drive my defects of character, just like I talked about for the last 10 minutes. And then that, unless I am now willing, step 6, to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects, both sobriety and peace of mind will still elude him. So if I don't work on these serious character flaws, I will not stay sober. It's fucking fact. I've seen it over and over. This is why we have to work on this shit. You know, the message I hear is God just does this, and the writing in these 2 steps are so small in the book that nobody pays attention to them, and they think that this is all about a fucking substance problem. But in step 1, it tells me 3 times that the alcohol and the drugs are but a symptom. So what the fuck are we talking about? So the message that I like to carry in the rooms is, this is about a fucking defect of character problem. This is about flaws in my makeup. And this is how we get well. And the more that I learn how to turn over my will and my life over to God, I don't want to fucking drink. So that's why I'm doing this study like this for the Design for Living. And it tells me in step 10, later in the reading, And it tells me in Bill's story, and it tells me in We Agnostics. He couldn't drink even if he wanted to. His alcoholic problem was taken away that very night years ago. It disappeared. And it says it in step 10. The problem's been removed. Haven't even sworn off. Why? Because we're working on our own self-discipline and the defects of character and turning to God. Then we don't want to drink. So if I focus on that second delusion, and that's what I'm talking about, that I can wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world if I only manage well. Because when I'm acting in defects, that's what I'm trying to do. So if I can smash that delusion, I won't want to drink. Which is why I'm doing the study this way. And I'm focusing a little bit on the substance, of course, because it's important. But I'm focusing way more on everything else, because I think that's way more important. And that's what this line just talked about. Have been the primary cause of his destructive drinking and his failure at life. That unless he is now willing to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects, both sobriety and peace of mind will still elude him. And here we go. That all the faulty foundation of his life will have to be torn out and built a new on bedrock. That means we rip it out. God, build with me and do with me as thou wilt. And we rebuild from scratch. Remember Roland Hazard's story? Carl Jung was like, okay, Roland, yes, you're a fucking hopeless alcoholic. It's in there as a solution. You can refer to him as the certain American businessman if you want to read about it. He's like, goes to the doctor and goes, why can't I stay sober? And Dr. Young's like, dude, you're fucked. You know, you will not stay sober. You're the hopeless kind. He says, unless you have this, once in a while I've heard they're called vital spiritual experiences. He says, to me, they're a phenomenon. This phenomenon, this vital spiritual experience is what we do here. And he tells Roland, their ideas, emotions, and attitudes that have been the guiding forces of the lives of these men have to be cast aside. We have to allow a whole new set of conceptions begin to dominate them. That's what we're talking about. That's what this line talks about. I got to take the old way of life, cast it aside, and build it upon a new bedrock. All the faulty foundation of my life needs to be built upon a new bedrock. Remember back in the We Agnostics chapter when I told you to circle cornerstone? Upon this cornerstone, this foundation, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And then I read the term cornerstone to you on a different session, and it says the idea that everything is built from. God is the bedrock that I'm talking about, that everything gets built from. This is the cornerstone. And when God is the cornerstone and everything comes from God, it's going to fucking go fine. As long as you implement the concept of God is the Father. You are his child, he is the employer, and you work for him. That's kind of, those two things married together will give you the gifts, the real gifts of life. Not just sobriety in this program, but of life. Now willing to commence the search for his own defects, like we do, he will ask, just how do I go about this? How do I take inventory for myself? Since step 4 is but the beginning of a lifetime practice. Circle that and remember that, because this is a beginning of a lifetime practice. You don't do your first set of steps and say, fuck, I'm good for life. Because remember in the 4, when I read it last week, we searched out the flaws in our makeup that caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested itself in various ways is what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. That's just the common ones in step 4 and 5. Step 5 said we ascertained in a rough way what the basic trouble is. So I'm only looking at basic trouble and common manifestations. What about the shit underneath all that shit? And that's the other thing I find in the rooms is we just talk about the 4 and the 5, but we don't talk about all the other work that needs to come after through the longevity of your recovery to kind of level you up as you go. And these are the messages that I want to bring. And hopefully as you guys get healthy and you guys understand what the fuck I'm talking about, because I'm going into great detail, you guys can kind of deliver the same ideas and we can help like influence. We think we don't have the ability to do anything. But our little nick of the woods, we can change a lot of things, man. And, just from my own experience, just me being me, fuck, it ripples, man. And then anyone else, it can ripple. And like, this has far-reaching effects, but, so we just take responsibility and we, like I said, be spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation on our own right. And just be this shit every day, and it will manifest, right? Just takes over. Anyway, beginning of a lifetime practice. It can be suggested that he first have a look at those personal flaws which are acutely troublesome and fairly obvious. Using his best judgment of what has been right and what has been wrong, he might make a rough survey of his conduct with respect to his primary instincts for sex, security, and society. I like that because those are the main ones, right? Sex, security, and we got different levels of security. Like, there's so many different kinds of security. Like, you could probably have 10 different levels of security. Emotional security within my man friends. Emotional security with my women friends. Emotional security with my daughters, and security within the status in my hierarchy at work, security within my group of AA members, and this shit drives us, right? Powerfully, blindly, and subtly. So I encourage you to look at your own security issues and see where you might need to strengthen those things. And society. Looking back over his life, he can readily get underway by consideration of questions such as these. When and how and just what instances did my selfish pursuit of sex relation damage other people and me? What people were hurt and how badly? Did I spoil my marriage and injure my children? Did I jeopardize my standing in the community? Just how did I react to these situations at the time? Did I burn with guilt and nothing could extinguish? And as you read these questions, and you might think of an incident yourself in your life, we'll probably have justified it already so that we can hold on to our piece of false integrity, because we need to live with ourselves and look at ourselves in the mirror. But unless we fucking get real with ourselves and see the truth, we won't be able to really move on. So these are the kind of questions that are really good, of maybe something in your life that you need to look at. And because it kind of just aligns with the beginning of the 4 that we read last week. We want to find out exactly how, when, and where our natural desires warped us. We wish to look squarely at the unhappiness this has caused others and ourselves. By discovering what these emotional deformities in us are, we can move towards their correction. That's what we're talking about. But we're liable to suffer severe reactions once we start probing these things, right? Because then our pride gets hurt and shit. But I'm just telling you that, these are areas we got to dig into. We had to find a chink in the armor of the walls that the ego had built so that the light of reason, the light of God, can shine into these dark areas. So there's no point if you're just sweeping the shit under the carpet. It's not helping you. That's what I'm saying, is it doesn't help you. And if you can get courageous and willing and open and honest to say, you know what, fuck it. Let's look at this. Let me be humbled through the pain and humiliation of looking at this shit, and go to your 12-step God-centered pillar, sponsor, whatever, and bring this shit to the surface. Because the gold is in there, man. That's where the gold is. But it's scary, right? Like I said, do what's easy. Don't look at it. Make your life a long journey. Or dig in and do what's hard and bring it to the light. And I'm not saying that it's easy either, but it's necessary. Did I burn with guilt that nothing could extinguish? Or did I insist that I was pursued and not the pursuer? Thus rationalize or absolve myself. How have I reacted to frustration in sexual matters? When denied, did I become vengeful or depressed? Did I take it out on other people? If there was rejection or coldness at home, did I use this as a reason for promiscuity? There's so much information in there that if you really get honest with yourself, you can find some areas to dig into. Also of importance for most alcoholics are the questions they must ask about their behavior respecting financial and emotional security. In these areas, fear, greed, possessiveness, and pride have too often far done their worst. Surveying this business or employment record, almost any alcoholic can ask questions like these. In addition to my drinking problem, what character defects contributed to my financial instability? Did fear and inventory about my fitness for my job destroy my confidence and fill me with conflict? Did I try to cover up these feelings of inadequacy by bluffing, cheating, lying, or evading responsibility? Or by gripping that others failed to recognize my truly exceptional abilities? Did I overvalue myself and play the big shot? Did I have such unprincipled ambition that I double-crossed and undercut my associates? Was I extravagant? Did I recklessly borrow money, caring little whether it was paid back or not? Was I a pinch penny, refusing to support my family properly? Did I cut corners financially? What about the quick money deals, the stock market, and the races? There's a lot of good questions there, and lots that we can bring up in our own lives that aren't on here. But it can only be done through meeting with pillars, becoming willing, and talking. So like today, I did some inventory. I was told to do inventory by one of my pillars. He's got like 35 or 40 years in. He asked me to do it last week. I didn't get it all done the other day, so I had to cancel because I was procrastinating. And then fucking laughing at me because I'm just another degenerate alcoholic who procrastinates just like everyone else. But I got it done and we went over it today. And it was 4 or 5 hours of talking and asking and you know, of course I was humiliated and he called me out on a bunch of shit, but at the end of the day, I'm looking for that. I want to grow. So I'm still doing that at 5 years in, and I'll do it again when I have to. And I do it all the time, actually, just not in a big of increments like I did today. Businesswomen in AA will naturally find that many of these questions apply to them too. But the alcoholic housewife can also make the family financially insecure. She can juggle charge accounts, manipulate the food budgets, spend her afternoons gambling, and run her husband into debt by irresponsibly waste and extravagance. But all alcoholics who have drunk themselves out of jobs, family, and friends will need to cross-examine themselves ruthlessly. I like that. Bill's like, you got to do this ruthlessly, right? To determine how their own personality defects have thus demolished their security. The most common symptoms of emotional insecurity are, here they are, worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. Okay, let's just talk about that again. These are fucking alcoholic traits. These are the traits that I see clinical depressed people come in, and they will only focus on their clinical depression, and they will not focus on the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they stay sick. I always tell guys I work with, if they're clinically depressed or whatever, do this program, and then we'll see what you're like after. And then, you know, I don't know how many times over the years I've seen people with all these symptoms go, fuck, I thought I was clinically depressed, or I had all this anxiety issues. All I had was untreated alcoholism. Untreated alcoholism looks like everything except alcoholism. And because you're going to the doctor and you're not really being honest, and they don't even understand alcoholism anyway, they're going to treat your symptoms. So the program treats a lot of your symptoms. Actually, God treats a lot of our symptoms. Because like I talked about last week, most of my stresses, most of my physical fucking illness comes out because of my internal illness and me, being stuck in me. These stem from causes which were sometimes to be within us, and at other times to come from without. To take inventory in this respect, we ought to consider carefully all personal relationships which bring continuous or reoccurring trouble. There you go. It's a pretty important line. To take inventory in this respect, we ought to consider carefully all personal relationships which bring continuous or reoccurring trouble. There's a big one, big asterisk right there. It should be remembered that this kind of insecurity may arise in any area where instincts are threatened. Questions directed to an end like this might run like this. Looking at both past and present, what sex situation have caused me anxiety, bitterness, frustration, or depression? So you can look back in your sex conduct and go, which relationships caused you these things? Appraising each situation fairly, every one. We can see where I'd been at fault. Did these perplexities beset me because of selfishness or unreasonable demands? Or if my disturbance was seemingly caused by the behavior of others, I like that seemingly, because we'll fucking justify anything. Why do I lack the ability to accept conditions I cannot change? These are the sort of fundamental inquiries that can disclose the source of my discomfort and indicate whether I may be able to alter my own conduct and so adjust myself serenely to self-discipline. Suppose that financial insecurity constantly arouses these same feelings. I can ask myself, to what extent have my own mistakes fed my gnawing anxieties? And if actions of others are part of the cause, what can I do about that? If I am unable to change the present state of affairs, am I willing to take the measures necessary to shape my life to conditions as they are? The questions like these, more of which will come to mind easily in each individual case, will help turn up the root causes. And I always talk about the root causes. A lot of this shit we're talking about, we're trying to expose the branches, the shit that causes our pain initially, the shit that pokes us in the eye that's easy to see. But what about why is it happening? It's easy to see the defect, but we need to follow the breadcrumbs back. And it all gets back to the first page and a half in the step 4 and the 12 and 12. The instincts. And then we got to go further back in the instincts. And find out exactly how, when, and where this shit has warped us. Okay, here we go. This is fucking great. This is kind of the gold. This is it. This is everything right here. But it is from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. Boom. Of course it is. And notice, he writes twisted relations with family, friends, and society that many of us have suffered the most. Yeah. Think about it. Any of your suffering has to do with a relationship, and it's from family or it's friends or it's society at large, and it's twisted relations. We have been especially stupid and stubborn about them. The primary fact, the number one fact, is that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. Boom. The number one thing that we will not fucking recognize is our utter inability to form a true one-on-one giving and receiving, giving mostly, relationship with any other human being. That's what this program teaches us. First, it teaches us a relationship with God, relationship with our sponsor, and we're building a relationship with ourselves, because the biggest fight is with me in here. True self, and I get to truth about myself, and then I'm able to have good relationships with other people. And that's what this program does. But I like this. You never hear anyone in the rooms ever talk about this line, do you? It's the number one reason that we fail to recognize is we're not able to have good relationships. And why? Because our egomania digs us two disastrous pitfalls. Either we insist upon dominating the people we know, or we depend upon them far too much. So which one are you? Maybe you're kind of a combination. Sometimes we flip back and forth. What I see about alcoholics is we're not usually in the middle on these things. Like I'm either pride, full-on ego, or I'm pride in reverse. I'm never usually too much in the middle, although sometimes. But I can be like really egocentric, and then I'm like the exact opposite, pride in reverse. So I can either do, I can dominate you, or then I depend on you far too much. And I'm never really in the middle. If we lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail us. For they are human too, and cannot possibly meet our incessant demands. In this way, our insecurity grows and it festers. When we habitually, habit-forming, try to manipulate, mind and emotional blackmail others to our own willful desires, they revolt, and they resist us heavily. Then we develop hurt feelings, a sense of persecution, and a desire to retaliate. As we redouble our efforts at control and continue to fail, our suffering becomes acute and constant. We have not once sought to be one in the family, to be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Always tried to struggle to the top of the heap or hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership relation with any one of those about us. Of true brotherhood, we had small comprehension. So I like that. What we're talking about in this whole paragraph is the actor. I'm the actor. I will try to habitually manipulate you to my own willful desires. I'm going to pry and I'm going to manage and I'm going to fucking try to arrange everything so that you give me what I think I need to give me happiness. You know, then you get pissed off at me because I'm trying to like manage and force my will so that you give me what I think I need. And then you resist me heavily. And I'm just like, whoa. Then I get fucking hurt feelings and I'm like, holy fuck, what did I fucking do? It's just trying to be nice out of great intention. But my motive under there was very selfish and self-seeking. But I'm only gonna fucking look at it as intention. The alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, but I usually don't think so because I'm being nice about it. And then I develop a sense of persecution and then a desire to retaliate. You know, poor me. And then I'm going to be like, well, you know what? Fuck you then. And then you kind of come and kind of snuggle up to me and I just like elbow you and like turn my fucking roll over and, you know, this mind and emotional manipulation shit. You know, I fucking get up, fucking kind of slam the door. And then you say to me, did you slam the door? And I'm like, no. Are you fucking on glue? Why would I slam the door? Like all of this shit. This is the truth. Like, this is how we roll. And we're working in force. We're working in total force. And force needs to be fed energy constantly. Force is incomplete. And then when you work in love and you work in power in these relationships, then you start understanding how to form a true partnership. And that's what this book teaches us too. But these are the things I want you to like watch and realize and watch them in other people. And other people are there to teach you. Every person in your life's there to teach you. Sometimes it's what not to do. And it's sometimes a mirror of what's happening to you. And every relationship will give you the strength, if you have the strength, to use it to drive through it. But if you take the relationship and you try to go around it because you don't want to deal with the pain, then you're going to fucking deal with the pain again somewhere down the road. Until you learn how to deal with it, it will always be presented to you. And then your suffering becomes, what does it say here? Acute and constant. We have to deal with it. And that is why in step 7 it says we begin to fear pain less and desire humility more than ever. I'm just going to read this paragraph. 75, top of 75. Then in AA, we looked, we listened. Everywhere I see failure and misery, transformed by step 6, humility, pain and suffering, humility, into priceless assets, because that's where the gold is. We heard story after story of how humility had brought strength out of this seemingly weakness. In every single fucking case, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. This pain is the price that you pay into this new life. But this admission price purchased more than you expected. So be open and just do it, because there's way more gifts here. And it's telling me here, it purchases more than you expect. Way more than you expect. It brought a measure of humility, step 7 humility, which we soon discovered to be the healer of pain. Isn't that one of the best promises in all the literature? Wouldn't you want all your pain to be healed? That is through development of the fortitude to go through things and learn the lessons. And then you start realizing that all people are emotionally or spiritually sick and frequently wrong, just like you. And that nothing really matters. And everything's not happening to you. It's just happening. When you go outside, it ain't raining on you. It's just raining. Right? Fucking it's windy out. It's not windy on you. It's fucking just windy. Shit doesn't happen to you anymore. Shit just happens. And you understand people are people. And you cease fighting anyone and anything, including yourself. Because you quit putting expectations on yourself. And then you quit putting expectations on others. And fucking magic happens. We begin to fear pain less and desire this genuine humility that's obtained in step 7, surrender, even more. But go to 72, bottom of 72 for a second. But this process of gaining this perspective, the change, is unbelievably painful. It's only by repeated humiliations, looking at these inventories and trying to correct them and making mistakes and fucking fumbling around, that we were forced to learn something about humility. Step 6, humility, groveling despair. It was only at the end of a long road marked by successive defeats and humiliations and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency that we begin to feel humility is something more than a condition of groveling despair. So through all of this pain, there's growth. But while you're living in the pain, it doesn't seem like it's growth. And it seems like this is never going to end. And is this all there is? No. I always say nothing good in life comes easy. So you got to go through this to get to the light. When you climb a mountain, it fucking sucks. But when you get to the top, you're elated. And then the fucking going down is a cinch. Well, the mountain's to be climbed. And the view from the top of the mountain is breathtaking, right? It's kind of the same as seeking real humility. And then as you get to this place of real, genuine humility, a desire to seek and do God's will and you surrender, the fucking downhill rest of your life, going downhill, every now and then you hit a little fucking, cliff you got to climb or whatever. But it's pretty good view. Because your whole perspective on life changes. The most profound result of all was our change in our attitude towards God. God is not a bush league pinch hitter anymore when you're surrendered. He is everything. He is the seemingly good in your life and the seemingly bad. Okay, let's go back. Anyone know what time it is? Okay, at 10 after, we're going to take a couple minute break. Yeah, I can finish this. As soon as we're done this, we'll take a break. So anyway. So I'm just going to start here again. 53, about 2/3 of the way down. We have not once sought to be one in the family. To be a friend among friends. To be a worker among workers. To be a useful member of society. We always tried to struggle to the top of the heap or to hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership relation with any one of those about us. Of true brotherhood, we had small comprehension. Some will object to many of the questions posed because they think their own character defects have not been so glaring. To these, it can be suggested that conscious examination is likely to reveal these very defects objectionable questions are concerned with. Because our surface record hasn't looked too bad, we have frequently been abashed to find that this is so simply because we have buried these self-same defects deep down under the thick layers of justification. So we just bury this shit. But it has to be extricated. And if we don't extricate it, then it causes us more problems as we go. I love how they wrote that. Buried these self-same defects deep down in us under thick layers of self-justification. Whatever the defects, they have finally ambushed us into alcoholism and misery. Therefore, thoroughness ought to be a watchword when taking inventory. In this connection, it is wise to write out our questions and answers. It will be an aid to clear thinking and honest appraisal. It will be the first tangible evidence of our complete willingness to move forward. So, I did this reading based on tying it into step 6. Okay? So the component of 4 is, and when I do a 4, it's my first tangible evidence of my willingness to move forward. Step 3 isn't, because I don't even know what step 3 is until a 4 is done. It tells me the first tangible evidence of my willingness to change my life comes when I've completed step 4. And then we move on. Don't do this stuff in this book instead of step 4. Do this shit later with your sponsor or by yourself, but always talk about it with somebody. Discuss whatever you write down with somebody who's more experienced and 12-stepped, and grow and learn some more. But don't do it instead of. Never instead of. Okay, I'm going to start at the beginning of 63 on step 6. I know we read some of this last week or on Friday. We're going to reread it. And I'm just going to touch on the points again. And then we'll just keep reading through it. So, basically, step 6 to me is surrender of step 7. In step 11, there's a reading. It says it on the wall, and it's the step in general, but it's not the full step because none of the steps are on the wall. All the steps are in the book. But what does it say on the wall? It says, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry out steps 6 and 7. Why do I say that? Because I'm learning God's will in step 6. I'm learning it. Please take away my difficulties. Me and God are working together to relinquish my will for His will. So I'm learning through this unbelievable process of repeated humiliations and defeats, successive defeats and humiliations. I'm learning about what humility is. And then I start learning it at a different level than this groveling despair. So I'm learning what humility is. So I'm going to describe humility quickly again. Humility is humiliation, phase 1. Humble through pain, phase 2. And these two bounce back and forth. But then step 7, humility, is the desire to seek and do God's will. And through the first 2, persistently, consistently, I get to a different level of humility. And that's where the gifts are. That is kind of getting to the top of that mountain when you get to that place. And I talked about it last week in altruism. Altruism aligns exactly with humility. So as I start helping others or being of service, when I first get here, I'm only doing it because I need to stay alive. And that's humiliating. And I'm doing it through pain. And then I keep doing it anyway. Then I start realizing it makes me feel good. So that's like the second phase. Humbled through some pain. But it's not always that bad. And then I get to the third phase of altruism, which is I unselfishly devote my time, welfare, well-being to other people for their own happiness and well-being. But I get to the point of unselfishly devoting myself in the third phase of altruism. So that's why humility is this desire to seek and do God's will. And they're just aligned so perfectly. And step 6 is learning what that is. And then what is step 7? Step 7 to me is I'm living in God's will. And when you look at step 6, it talks about entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. This is the self-will that blocks the entry of God into my life. So when I'm acting in these defects, these difficulties that cause my difficulties, I'm actually using my will, my instincts gone astray, and I'm blocking off God's will, which is why I usually feel so miserable and in such pain and discontentment, and I'm restless and irritable. And if I stay there too long, I want to drink. But as long as I'm not wanting to drink, I can work on those things. And then through enough of that, I get to what? Step 7. Shortcomings. Well, what's the difference between a defect and a shortcoming? What's the difference between step 6 and 7? 6 is I'm learning surrender. Step 7 is I have surrendered. Step 6 is I'm learning about humility through groveling despair and pain. Step 7 is I have a different kind of humility. It's a different perspective of humility. And what's shortcoming is I've surrendered to God, but I'm still human. So I'm not always going to do it perfectly. But my desire to fucking live that way is there. Whereas in step 6, I'm still fighting the desire. Do I really want to live that way? Fuck, this seems hard. Step 7, I've surrendered. I'm like, yeah, I do want to live that way. And it's a shortcoming. And as I go through life wanting to do God's will, I still make mistakes. But really, are they mistakes? No. Because I have a sincere desire to do God's will. And it's not a mistake. But I fall short every now and then. And it's much different than step 6 where I'm still struggling with my old ideas and ways. Step 7, I've surrendered to new ideas and ways. And we'll get way more into that next Friday, because step 7 is my absolute favorite step in the program. And step 6 is too, but I just love step 7. So, step 6, what are we talking about? We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. All of them. Whatever ones are objectionable. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. So declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. He goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without any reservations whatever has indeed come a long way spiritually, and therefore is entitled to be called a man who is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own Creator. Fuck, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. Any person capable of enough willingness, honesty, try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without reservation, whatever, has indeed come a long way spiritually. Okay, I'm going to quickly flip to step 10 in the big book, because it's saying the same shit. Page 84. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue. Again, for anyone that hasn't read this with me, I want you to notice there's 4 continues. And there's 1 commenced. And remember what we read in step 4. It said this is the beginning of a lifetime practice. Okay? So this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue. Boom. To take personal inventory. Boom. Continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered into a world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. So, beginning of lifetime practice, step 4. Step 9 is kind of the end of that. But now it all works through your step 10. Continue lifetime practice. Now it says we continue again. So it should continue for a lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God to remove them at once. We discuss them with someone immediately. We make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone. Dash, even alcohol. Even alcohol. Because alcohol is not the fucking issue. I'm the issue. And when I quit fighting me in here and I find my truth, then I quit fighting you. So all of why I read this is it's because anyone with enough honesty and willingness to try repeatedly continue. Step 6, willingness to relinquish defects on all his faults without reservation has indeed come a long way. What does it say here? We ask God. We talk to another person. I enter into the world of the Spirit. Just tying it all together. Because that's what we do around here. Has indeed come a long way spiritually. Back to 6 and the 12 and 12. And therefore is entitled to be called a man who is sincerely, honestly trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own Creator. And if you don't know what your own creator is, write it out. And try to sincerely grow in the image and likeness of what you write out. Of course, this often disputed question whether God can and will, under certain conditions, remove defects of character will be answered with a prompt affirmative by almost any AA member. To him, this proposition will be no theory at all. It will be just about the largest fact of his life. So as you hear me talk about this stuff, I'm telling you that that line is me. It is the largest fact of my life. That relinquishment of this stuff and asking God to help me has been the largest fact of my life. It's gotten me closer to God than anything in this fucking book. Any prayer, meditation, anything else other than sponsorship. But sponsorship is exactly what we're doing here. I'm looking at myself, talking to myself, listening to myself, giving you advice that I adhere to as well. And I'm in God's will. I'm practicing every principle in my affair. I am out of the problem of self. Sponsorship's your greatest teacher, hands down. Hands down. And sponsorship teaches you all of this. So I'm going to quote another line out of Bill's story. I may as well just, since you guys all have your big books, I always like to look at the black and white because that's where our solution is. In Bill's story, okay, bottom of 14. Okay, bottom of the page. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all of my affairs. Remember back in There's a Solution? Much more important demonstrations of these principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and all of our affairs. It's way more important for me to get this shit happening outside of AA. And where does it happen? Happens through that step 10 that we just read. It happens through the 5-step process. That's where this happens. So it's much more important out there. And then it says, particularly, it was imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. It's imperative to work with others. Faith without works is dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. This is what I wanted to get to. For if alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life. So it's telling me how to perfect and enlarge my spiritual life through the work and self-sacrifice for others. He could not meet the certain trials and low spots in life ahead. Well, what is self-sacrifice? This is also a point I want to hammer home. I find out the problem is me, selfish self-centeredness. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear. I am selfish, but I usually don't think so. Once I start looking at not the motive anymore, I start looking at not the intention anymore. I start looking at the motive. And I start sacrificing my selfishness, my fear. I start sacrificing all these different things for the benefit of you. And it helps me. And where does that happen? Step 10. We continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. My manifestations of self. And then I ask God to remove it. So I'm asking to be sacrificed. Then I talk to my pillar and I find the damaged or unsaleable good to discard without regret. So I'm sacrificing, self-sacrifice. That's what step 6 is about. This is what we're talking about. Self-sacrifice for others. And that's how I perfect and enlarge my spiritual life. Through this work and self-sacrifice. Ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would indeed be dead. Period. With us, it's just like that. So I'm just going to read this since I'm here anyway. My wife and I abandon ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics. There it is again. Helping another alcoholic. To a solution of their problems. It doesn't say fucking like alcohol. It says problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time. So if you're not too well at the time, sometimes for your recovery, listen up. And I was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. If you get plagued by self-pity and waves of resentment and all this other shit, then what does it say? This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. Of course it's going to. Because that's fucking alcoholism. And you're not practicing step 10, obviously. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would always save the day. So when step 10s aren't working, when step 11s aren't working, when certain things aren't working, Then you work with another alcoholic and it will save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. So he's working with another alcoholic. And as I work with other alcoholics, I get amazingly lifted up and I get set back on my feet when I'm fucking in a miserable state. Because that's what we do. And that's what God does. And it's all God working in that situation, right? So I just wanted to kind of hammer that home. And I think it said working with others 4 times in about less than a page. And what I find hilarious is in the rooms, people aren't talking about working with others. There's a few. But importance of meetings. Well, that always comes up as a topic. What's the importance of the meeting? I don't know. But I can tell you what it says in Bill's story. Very last page of Bill's story tells me what the importance of meetings are. Bottom of 15, it says, we meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship that they seek. That's why we have meetings. So eventually we're bringing the message to the new people. I don't go to meetings so I get relief. I fucking work a whole week and I need relief. No, man. It's not what we're talking about. If you need relief at a meeting, you're doing something fucking wrong, in my opinion. Because Alcoholics Anonymous is not the meeting. It's the fellowship. The program of action is what we're talking about. So, importance of meetings. What do I say when I'm at a meeting and someone says importance of meetings? It gets on the board. I'm like, fuck, that's where you find the newcomers. That's where you find people to work with. That's where you bring the message. But what you do here, what message are we carrying in Alcoholics Anonymous? What message are we carrying in the rooms? There's a full message there. I think sometimes we only carry half the message. What's the message that we carry? What half? Yeah. We're carrying the mess. We need to carry the whole message. And the whole message is, what does it say in There's a Solution? This is the message this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. It's talking about brotherly and harmonious action. We're talking about God, essentially. Love and tolerance. I'm not talking about fucking the substance. Okay, middle of 63. Sure, I was beaten, absolutely licked. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol. Change of scene, the best efforts of my family, friends, doctors, clergymen got me no place with my alcoholism. I simply couldn't stop drinking, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house, then asked higher power, God as I understood him, to give me release, my obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out of me. In AA meetings all over the world, statements just like this are heard daily. It is plain for everybody to see that each sober AA member has been granted a release from this very obstinate and potentially fatal obsession. So in a very complete and literal way, all AAs have become entirely ready to have God remove the mania for alcohol from their lives. And God has proceeded to do exactly that. Perfect. Having been granted a perfect release from alcoholism, why then shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release from every other difficulty or defect? ? Well, we can. But this is the riddle of our existence. Riddles can't be answered. But the full answer of which may be only in the mind of God, of course, because God knows everything. Nevertheless, at least part of the answer is apparent to us. Okay, what does that mean? It means I got to do some fucking work. I got to do the heavy lifting and find some of this stuff. I got to find the root. I got to do the work that we were talking about in step 4. I got to do the inventory. And this sometimes is over time and over time and over time. Through this work, I get to relinquish it. And what am I actually doing as I relinquish it? I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of God. And the whole effectiveness of the AA program rests on how well and earnestly I do this. So, that's what we're talking about. And God just doesn't do it by himself. When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit the most unnatural act. Defying their instinctive desires for self-preservation, they seem bent upon self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instincts as they are humbled by the terrific beating administered by alcohol. The grace of God can enter and expel their obsession. Here their powerful instinct to live can cooperate fully with their Creator's desire to give them new life. For nature and God alike abhor suicide. But most of our other difficulties, defects, don't fall under such that category at all. Every normal person wants, for example, to eat, to reproduce, to be somebody in society of his fellows. Now we're getting into the instincts again. And he wishes to be reasonably safe and secure as he tries to attain these things indeed. God made him that way. He did not design man to destroy himself by alcohol, but he did give man instincts to help him stay alive. It is nowhere evident, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us fully to eliminate our instinctual drives. So as far as we know, it is nowhere on the record that God has completely removed any human being all his natural drives. Since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, isn't it strange that we often let these far exceed their intended purpose? When they drive us blindly, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than are possible, or do us. That is the point which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our character defects, or if you wish, our sins. But if we ask God, he will certainly forgive our derelictions. But in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. That is something we are supposed to be willing to work towards ourselves. I love it again. It's just saying the same thing as the cross page. God doesn't just do this shit. It means I got to be willing to work for this myself. In no case is God just going to render me white as snow and keep me that way without my cooperation. I got to be willing to do this. I got to be willing to expose this. And I got to be willing to work honestly, persistently, without reservations on all these things as much as I can. Does it mean that I do this perfectly? No. But I raise my eyes to perfection. I try with the will in all these areas as much as I can. And once in a while I'm going to fuck it up. But you know what? It's not a fuck up. It's not a fuck up anymore. It's just one of those things. Okay. He only asks that we try the best we know how to make progress in the building of character. And essentially that's what we're doing. We're essentially building character. So step 6, we are entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude that one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job. Lifetime job doesn't end. This does not mean that we expect all of our character defects to be lifted out of us as the drive to drink was. A few of them may be, but with most of them we shall have to be content with patient improvement. The key words entirely ready underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. That's what we're talking about. The very best we can know or learn. Let's try this without reservation. How many of us have this degree of readiness? In absolute sense, practically nobody has it. The best we can do, with all the honesty that we can summon, is to try to have it. Even the best of us will discover that to our dismay there is always a sticking point. A point at which we say, no, I can't give this up yet. So basically what we're talking about is, don't worry about being perfect. Don't beat yourself up for fucking not doing it perfect. And why I say this, because most alcoholics, whether you're depressive or not, we're perfectionists. Most of us are. And we want to do everything the best, and we want everything now. But you got to be content with patient improvement. And you can't beat yourself up. It's called self-love. And self-love doesn't come because you want it. Like, you can have moral and philosophical convictions galore, but you cannot live up to them even though you would like to. So we got to practice self-love. We got to practice affirmation type stuff. And we accept that, you know what? This is going to take a bit of time. But as you kind of get on the momentum of working on this stuff, it starts clicking. And then there's going to always be a sticking point. Point at which we say, no, I can't give this defect up yet. Well, what is it? It can be various defects. And maybe you say, no, I don't want to give this up yet. I fucking still like it. But what the point of this is we never say never. Never say never that you're going to give it up. Okay? And we shall often tread on even more dangerous ground when we cry, "This I will never give up." Such is the power of our instincts to overreach themselves. No matter how far we have progressed, there will always be desires no matter how far we have progressed, desires will always be found which oppose the grace of God. So you're never going to be perfect. It's never going to work out perfect. You can get to step 7, surrender, but it doesn't matter, because every now and then you got to fucking humble yourself in step 6. Because there's always going to be something that opposes the grace of God. And that's why step 6 is important. You can get to the level of surrender, but every now and then you got to fall into step 6 and really work hard at the elimination of something. Because there's going to be always a carrot that makes it look pretty attractive somewhere. Even when you're really well and doing well in the program, there's going to be something trying to tempt you. Some who feel they have done well may dispute this. So let's try to think it through a little further. Practically everybody wishes to be rid of his most glaring and destructive handicaps. No one wants to be so proud that he is scorned a braggart, nor so greedy that he is labeled a thief. No one wants to be angry enough to murder, lustful enough to rape, glutton enough to ruin his health. No one wants to be agonized by the chronic pain of envy or to be paralyzed by sloth. Of course, most human beings don't suffer these defects at these rock bottom levels. We who have escaped these extremes are apt to congratulate ourselves, yet can we? After all, hasn't it been self-interest, pure and simple, that has enabled most of us to escape? Not much spiritual effort is involved in avoiding excesses which will bring us punishment anyway. That's important. Like, just because you fucking aren't doing 150 down the highway anymore doesn't mean that you worked on a defect, because you're avoiding punishment anyway. You know, maybe it's your 3rd ticket at 150 and you're going to lose your license. Of course you're going to fucking stop. You know, just because you stop raping people doesn't mean we're going to pat you on the back and say, "Oh, great, you're doing good." Not raping people, not killing people. You know, maybe you punch people out every weekend and you're not punching people out. There's no spiritual value in that. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about, but when we face up to the less violent aspects of these very same defects, then where do we stand? Okay, these are the more subtle ones. What are these subtle ones? You know, the mind and emotional manipulation. Maybe I stayed up late one night. Maybe I was on a date, which I don't date, but maybe I was on one. And I stayed out till 4 a.m. But I knew I had to get up for work at 7. So I go to work at 7, but I'm late. So, you know, because I didn't get up on time. So I pressed the snooze on the alarm clock. And then I'm now rushing and trying to get out of the house. And, you know, I decided to have a shower even though I shouldn't have had one because I'm late. And then I don't warm up my car and my car is stalling. And I get to a stop sign and I don't stop because I'm late. And I got to be here. And then I get a ticket for not stopping at the stop sign. And then on my way, I'm speeding. Now I get a speeding ticket. Then I get to the office and my boss is giving me the gears because I'm late. And I'm thinking life's not treating me right. And fucking I blow up at him. And you know, I just created a whole series of bullshit. Because I was selfish the night before. Because I wanted what I wanted. And then I wanted to sleep in. And then I wanted a shower. Like the decisions based on self are just scattered all over that little scenario. But I'll get to the end of the day and go, fucking life's not treating me right. Fucking get home, boot the dog, maybe slam a couple doors. You know, maybe if I'm not spiritually fit, I fucking think I need a drink. Right? And through all of this process, you know, as a recovering alcoholic, understanding the program, I'd be doing step 10s all the way. Because I'd be aware of what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And I'd be letting each situation go to God. And by the time I'd get to work, I'd fucking make a full amend to my boss. And say, you know what? You're right. I caused all this and I'm sorry. And I humble myself and I try to do better the next day. That's kind of what the emphasis of this whole step that we're talking about is about. But we won't see these little decisions based on self, these little tiny ones that we try to watch for. And there's many, many, many more. Okay. What we must recognize now is that we exult in some of our defects. We really love them. Who, for example, doesn't like to feel just a little superior to the next fellow, or even quite a lot superior? That's me in a nutshell. When me and my buddy Jesse started going through this, when I experienced a whole shitload of pain back at about 1.5 years in, the whole reason I went into this stuff was because I didn't understand that this program was about what we're talking about. I just thought it was about me being sober. And then I started struggling really hard, and my sponsor's like, bro, when are you going to realize this has nothing to do about fucking drinking or drugging? It has to do really with your defects of character. And unless you start realizing, you're going to burn your life down in many areas of your life. You're going to be restless, irritable, discontent. You might risk drinking again. And I was like, fuck, I don't want to be like that, man. And I don't. And so me and Jesse got into this literature. We first listened to Joe and Charlie, big book study, and we dissected it. We rewound it. We talked about it, rewound it, talked more and more, and started getting into this little groove. And then we started in on step 6 was the first place, because I wasn't a big book thumper before. I actually hated big book thumpers. But I got into this 12 and 12, and I started dissecting step 6. And this was right here is where I really remember, fuck, holy shit, I do like to feel a little superior to my fellows. Sometimes quite a lot superior. And then Jesse and I started giving examples of each other where we like to be superior. And then as we gave all these examples, like the next day or next week, I'd be out in society going, holy fuck, I'm trying to be superior to this guy. And then I would go, holy shit, God, please remove the superior thing that I'm trying to do right now. I don't want to act superior, and I'm judging this person or whatever it is. And so I started sacrificing myself for the benefit of these people and me. But I didn't really know what I was doing, but the stuff started clicking. And I was like, fuck, I don't want to live like that anymore. Then I started realizing, holy shit, it feels good not to fight other people. Myself mostly, because I'm fighting myself by trying to be superior, not accepting love and tolerance of somebody else. You know, whatever my reasons are to fucking be superior, it's the problems within me. So, you know, wherever I'm not going to talk a lot about the things in the step 6, but I will implore you to take your own time, find somebody that you can sit with and read this step and talk about this shit. And be totally vulnerable with the person or people, maybe there's more than one, about superior. Look at your relationship life, your work life, every part of your life, and go, where do I like to be superior? And fucking do an examination of it. And maybe write a prayer on it. And ask God to help you. And then when you do this stuff, when you get out there into the world, it starts fucking showing itself, and you're like, holy shit. I never knew that I was like that. You know, that's what I talked about, self-realization. You start realizing a lot of things about yourself. Okay, next. Isn't it true that we like to let greed masquerade as ambition? It's another good one. Where am I liking to let greed masquerade as ambition? Or this one is a good one. We could talk for an hour on this one. To think of liking lust seems impossible. But how many men and women speak love with their lips and believe what they say so that they can hide lust in the dark corner of their minds? Yeah, lots of people are going to give you the lip service of, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for, but really you're hiding lust in the back corner of your mind. And like anyone on this video is probably does that. Because I've worked with lots of alcoholics and most of them do that. And it's okay to do that. Why? Because we're fucking human. We can't control our every thought. And it's okay to even have that as long as the partner that you're going for will accept that and you're open and vulnerable enough to talk about this shit. The problem is people aren't open and vulnerable enough. And then they'll get in a relationship where their partner's actually not that. And then they're in a relationship where this is really important part of their life. And it fucking fails because you weren't true to yourself. You selfishly didn't say something because you didn't want to, your pride was too hurt. You weren't vulnerable. And it ended up hurting you. And next thing you know, you got 2 kids. And because of this, you got to break up. And now you're breaking up a family. It sounds small, but through the vulnerability of early in the relationship talking about this kind of shit, you could have avoided a whole bunch of pain and misery. That's why true self is so important to get to. Because then I can speak my truth without shame, without having to justify it. And even while staying within conventional bounds, many people have to admit that their imaginary sex excursions are apt to be all dressed up as dreams of romance. And all this paragraph is really showing you is how you can say one thing, but you actually are believing something else, or you're doing something else. And you will believe what you say, but the reality is something else. Which is okay. Right? I'll talk about sex conduct in the step 4. Most sponsors aren't going to really talk deeply to the sponsee about sex conduct. Why? Because it's like an area everyone's like scared to talk about. But it's the most important area, and to me, in the whole step 4, because it reveals everything that's important about the defects of character. Why? Because in the sex conduct, it's actually a relationship conduct. You can see where you're emotionally tied, and where you're emotionally broken or bent, or where you're struggling with sex relation issues, but it's way more than just lust. Under lust is all these other things. Emotional insecurities, abandonment issues, inner child issues, all sorts of shit. So as the sponsor, you got to talk about this shit, because that's where the gold is. And I don't want to fucking drink again, and I don't want my sponsee to drink. And for me as the sponsor, that's where the gold is. I got to talk about that stuff, because then the person is able to find the root. And the root is where when you tug on a root, you can get the root out. It's like when a dandelion or thistle grows and you cut it with a lawnmower, what's the first thing to grow back? Fucking the dandelion and thistle. But when you cut the grass, everything looks cool. That's like your first step 4. Oh, fuck, everything looks cool. But what about the dandelion and thistle that grow back again? It's going to keep fucking growing back faster than the grass. It's always going to cause you problems. But if you can get down into the dirt and kind of grab that fucking root and start tugging on that dandelion thistle root, and you start pulling on it slowly, eventually you pull out the whole root. But you got to do it gently, and you got to do it over time. And then that dandelion and thistle don't grow back again. And that part of the grass stays good. That's kind of what we're talking about with our deep-rooted issues that cause our difficulties, that cause most of our difficulties. Okay, self-righteous anger can also be very enjoyable. In a perverse way, we can actually take satisfaction from the fact that many people annoy us, for it brings a comfortable feeling of superiority. Gossip barbed with our anger, a polite form of murder by character assassination, has its satisfactions for us too. Here we are not trying to help those we criticize, we are trying to proclaim our own righteousness. That's a great paragraph. Self-righteous anger is very enjoyable. Who doesn't like a little bit of that shit? That's a little superiority, right? In a perverse way, we can actually take satisfaction from the fact that many people annoy us. Oh, did you hear what that guy said? Oh, what a fucking guy, blah, blah, blah. We'll try to be nice about it, Let's gossip, but let's be nice about it. For it brings a comfortable feeling of superiority. And then as you start learning this shit, and then that happens in your real life, then you start going, fuck, this is wrong. And then you know what's wrong. And if you keep doing it, you're missing the mark, but then you're just entrenching the old behavior back in your life. And I know a lot of people do this constantly. They gossip and fucking act superior. And that's like, fuck, a lot of people on this chat probably live their life like that a lot. Like I did. But once you start becoming aware of it and you start going, you know what, this ain't fucking right. It's so hard to be that one person out of a group of 5 people that are talking shit about somebody to say, you know what, this ain't fucking right and I ain't doing it. And all you got to do is walk away yourself. And if you're working with, God-centered people, maybe you just say, you know what, this ain't right. Or can we have a discussion about it? Because you know what, sometimes I think teaching using the information and experiences for teaching, totally understanding we're not trying to hurt or harm somebody, and you don't have to use names. It can be a fucking awesome tool to teach from. But it's got to be done with tact and common sense, with no intent of harm or bad karma. But it takes you to want to work on this shit, and then you feel so good once you practice this type of behavior. But every now and then we'll fall into it. I'm not saying that I don't fall into it. One of my favorite things with my bro is to just fucking do this. You know, I don't want to get rid of it. I still enjoy it too much. Do I live my life like that? No. But do I every now and then talk to my buddy and go, fuck, you know what? This fucking guy, oh my God, what a fucking idiot. Blah, 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 blah. You know, whatever. I'm fucking human too. I'm working on it. I'm work in progress. But then this next one, gossip barbed with our anger, a polite form of murder by character assassination. Had its satisfactions for us too. Here we're not trying to help those we criticize. We claim our own self-righteousness. That happened to me. And then I started realizing, okay, well, it happened to me. And I know how shitty I felt over it. So then I'm going to not do it to anyone else. And so I learned through the pain of it happening to me. But based on some of my actions, don't get me wrong. But it was contempt prior to investigation. So somebody contempted me without knowing any facts, fucking blew it right the fuck up, and then I suffered fucking greatly from it. And realized, you know what? All I can do is change me and my actions, and I can't justify fucking everything to everybody. So I fucking got to get good with my pillars. That's where the word pillars came from. This is where my saying, I'm not capable of honesty on my own. I'll just justify and rationalize the most errant nonsense to suit my actions or my inaction. The alcoholic life is the only number one. I can't always see the truth because I have rationalization. And it is the arch enemy of me. And when you think of an arch enemy of something, usually the enemy knows more about the person or the country than the country or the person does about themselves. And that's my enemy, is rationalization. And I always like to say rational lies. I'll tell myself bullshit and I believe it. And I need to hold on to this false integrity because I need to look at myself in the mirror and live with myself. So, gossip barbed with our anger. It's a polite form of murder by character assassination. I love how he does that. Let's make it all sound polite, and then let's fucking jab the knife into it by murder by character assassination. Because really, what else is it? It's not doing any good in the world. So, I'm not going to stop too much on here, but we are going to talk about gluttony, only right now. And gluttony, not just with food. Gluttony can be with everything. And then there's procrastination in this reading too. Procrastination is one of those things that has alcoholism written all over it. But it doesn't cause you enough pain. But when you look at procrastination in general, it has alcoholism and rationalization on all sorts of shit written all over it. And if we can work on these subtle ones, we're fucking gonna gain. I always say, watch the pennies and the nickels, and the dollars take care of themselves. And these are the pennies and the nickels. It's the small shit along the way. And then the big shit kind of works itself out. But your typical member is only going to be like working on the shit when the house is burning down. But you're in for a long, windy road when the house is burning down because it doesn't work. It works, but it's a long, slow process with a lot of pain involved and a lot of hurting. So when gluttony is less than ruinous, we have a milder word for that too. We call it taking our comfort. We live in a world riddled with envy. To a greater or less degree, everybody is infected with it. From this defect, we must surely get a warped yet definite satisfaction. Else why would we consume such great amounts of time wishing for what we have not, rather than working for it, or angrily looking for attributes we shall never have, instead of adjusting to the fact and accepting it? And how often we work hard with no better motive than to be secure and slothful later on. Only we call that retiring. Consider too our talents for procrastination, which is really sloth in 5 syllables. Nearly anyone could submit a good list of such defects as these. And few of us would seriously think of giving them up, at least until they cause us excessive misery. And that's the truth. Some stuff we're not going to relinquish till we've had enough pain. But in step 7, it says we don't need to be bludgeoned and beaten into the humility anymore. I don't need this bludgeoning anymore. It can come quite as much from my voluntary reaching for it as it can come from unremitting suffering. But that's a choice we got to make. And sometimes we know we could go that other way and make it easier, but we still suffer in the pain, and let's wait until we fucking are beaten up a bit. But we don't need to be doing it like that. Some people, of course, may conclude that they are indeed ready to have all such defects taken from them. But even these people, if they construct a list of still milder defects, will be obliged to admit that they prefer to hang on to some of them. Therefore, it seems plain that few of us can quickly or easily become ready to aim at spiritual or moral perfection. So I just want to highlight on this page, I think Bill talks about perfection 3 times. Because this essentially is what this step is about. It's about raising our bar to perfection. And this is what separates the men from the boys. The men are going to go for, a higher level and do the shit without reservation as much as they can and try really hard, even when it's fucking hard. Whereas the boy is only going to do enough work that gets them by. And they're not really going to do all this stuff. And they're not really going to grow in humility. And they're still going to fuck around and seek selfish desires and fuck newcomers and still steal and lie and just do dumb shit. A lot of guys are still doing that. I talk about 3 levels of recovery. Low level, mid level, and high level. There's lots of low and mid level and not so much high level. But in each level, there's increments of it. I always say, what level do you want to be in? The low level, you're risking drinking again and living not very happily. Mid level, there's a little bit of fucking okayness in there, but there's so much fucking around going on. High level, that's where the gifts are, in my opinion. And if you want high level recovery, then you ask what high level recovery people are doing, and you do what they do, and you try to seek and hang out with them. And even if you don't seek and hang out with them, as long as you're practicing the program at this level, the fellowship you crave is going to grow up about you. And the fellowship you crave in mid-level or low level will also grow up about you. Why? Because water finds its own level in life, period. And also in this program. So, whatever water level you want, you'll find. And, you're the creator of your own destiny, really. And whatever you think about is going to come to fruition. If you live in fear and discontentment, then guaranteed you're going to probably have a life of fear and discontentment. If you can try to spin that around and do some positive things, positive affirmations, positive reinforcement, positive acts of altruism, and you keep trying persistently and consistently, you change the momentum of your life and things start changing. And that's what I see with people in this program all the time. I've seen people with the worst possible attitude turn into the most positive people in the world. I've seen people with horrible sex conduct have fucking awesome sex conduct. Some of the most angriest people in the world are some of the nicest and sweetest in the world. People that have spent most of their life in jail and on the streets, now living content, happy lives. Therefore, it seems plain that few of us can quickly or easily become ready to aim at spiritual or moral perfection. We want to settle for only as much perfection as will get us by in life, according, of course, to our various and sundry ideas of what will get us by. So the difference between the boys and the men is the difference between striving for a self-determined objective, a satisfying selfish desire, or for the perfect objective, which is God. Many will at once ask, how can we accept the entire implication of step 6? Why, that is perfection. This sounds like a hard question, but practically speaking, it isn't. Only step 1, where we made the 100% admission we were powerless over alcohol, can be practiced with absolute perfection. The remaining 11 steps state perfect ideals. They are goals to which we look and the measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress. Seen in this light, step 6 is still difficult, but not at all impossible. The only urgent thing is that we make a beginning and we keep trying. Like I keep saying, the pains of drinking before serenity and inner turmoil before serenity. And it's not easy, but it's fun once you get into it. If we were to gain any real advantage in the use of this step on problems other than alcohol, yeah, that's what we're fucking talking about, then we shall need to make a brand new venture into open-mindedness. And what did I say, we agnostics? True gateway to knowledge is open-mindedness. That is where true knowledge exists, is through open-mindedness. And a lot of these defects that we act on come from our belief systems or ideologies of what society taught us. And as long as we're able to fucking let these ideas go, maybe there's something in there that can be revealed and show us a better way. That's why we need the open-mindedness. Because we have all these fixed ideas. We've boxed our lives in all these little segments and labeled everything and what life should be like. You know, a marriage should be like this. If you're Catholic, it's supposed to be exactly like this. Well, who said it is? You know, why does the friendship have to fucking be exactly how you think it is? What is loyalty to you? Loyalty to you and loyalty to me might have different meanings. Honesty to you and honesty to me have different meanings. So we got to be open to fucking knocking down the walls of what we think are good for us. Just as bad as knocking down the walls of what I think is bad for me. And when I really understand that I don't know what's fucking good for me or bad for me, then I'm on the right track. Jordan Peterson talks about, you wouldn't know the best fucking idea of your life if it hit you between the eyes. Because most of the best ideas in your life come presented to you and they look like the worst idea ever. And I believe that. Some of my greatest lessons in my life are loss of my house, family, career, fucking all this shit. But what were the greatest gifts to show me truth about life and what's important? The loss of those things. So I don't know what's good for me, and I don't know what's bad for me. Everything is God's will for me, hopefully, and everything is whatever God decides. So if it looks bad, okay, well, it's God. What does he want to teach me? And if it looks good, okay, it's God. But is it actually good? I don't fucking know. Just go through this life now, just accepting whatever kind of comes at me and just try to do my best with whatever I got. And if I make a mistake, to me, I'm not making a mistake. To you, it might be a mistake and you might condemn me for it. Fuck, go for it. But all I'm trying to do is the best as I can. And I'm going to go discern my mistake, which ain't a mistake, because I'm trying to do the best I can. And that's the same with all you guys. And once we start understanding that and we quit passing judgment, then we're okay. Right? And I don't care, typically, what anyone thinks. Because I'm usually good with my pillars. If I'm good with my pillars, I'm good with God. And people are full of judgment. That's what our world thrives on. People are full of superiority. Of course people are going to talk shit about me and about you and about everyone. But we try to be the change and not do that. And there's a saying, the truly humble cannot be humiliated. You don't ever need to justify what's right. And if you're listening to your truth inside, you never need to justify what is right. But if you're justifying anything, it's wrong. Because you're trying to justify bullshit. You know what's right if you listen to it and if you sharpen that tool. And that is the tool which will guide your whole life, which is why I always say you don't have to set all these boundaries in your life, because your inner guidance system will set all the boundaries. But it takes a while to sharpen that tool. It takes persistency, consistency, rigorous, which means accurate, honesty, and working with pillars and inventories and prayer and meditation. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. There are goals to which we look and measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress. Seen in this light, step 6 is still difficult but not at all impossible. The only urgent thing is that we make a beginning and keep trying. If we would gain any real advantage in the use of the step on problems other than alcohol, we shall need to make a brand new venture in open-mindedness. We shall need to raise our eyes towards perfection and be ready to walk in that direction. It will seldom matter how haltingly we walk. The only question will be, are we ready? Looking again at those defects we are still unwilling to give up. We ought to erase the hard and fast lines that we have drawn. Perhaps we shall be obliged in some cases still to say, this I cannot give up yet, which is fine. But we should never say to ourselves, this I will never give up. Let's dispose of what appears to be a hazardous open end we have left. It is suggested that we ought to become entirely willing to aim towards perfection. We note that some delay, however, might be pardoned. That word in the mind of a rationalizing alcoholic could certainly be giving a long-term meaning. He could say, how very easy, sure, I'll head towards perfection, but I'm certainly not going to hurry any. Maybe I can postpone dealing with some of my problems indefinitely. Of course, this won't do. Such a bluffing of oneself will have to go the way of many other pleasant rationalization. At the very least, we shall have to come to grips with some of our worst character defects and take action towards the removal as quickly as we can. The moment we say no, never, I'm not working on this shit, our minds closed against the grace of God. Delay is dangerous in these defects, and rebellion of these defects may be fatal. This is the exact point which we abandon limited objectives and move towards God's will for us. So delay is dangerous, and rebellion will be fatal, as it proves to be from time to time. About once a week, I hear about someone dying. So before I shut her down, so next Friday, I'm going to pull out another book, and it's going to be called Power versus Force. It's David R. Hawkins, and it's talking about step 6 and about step 7, but he calls it power, which is step 7, surrender to God, and force, which is wresting happiness and satisfaction out of this world by prying and manipulating and forcing goods in my life. And I'm going to read pieces out of that book. I'm going to read about what unconditional love is, and what love is in our society today. And I'm going to read what power gives you, and I'm going to read what force gives you. And you'll be able to identify the working power in your life and the benefits of, and how seemingly force looks like it should work, but it actually doesn't. And it creates us a lot of fucking misery and pain, which is what step 6 is about. It's about relinquishing the force and trying to obtain power. And step 7 is about working with power. So I'll be reading a little bit more on that on Friday, and we'll be doing step 7. So bring your 12 and 12 and let anyone know who you want. And I will be referring back to 6 and 7. 6 and 7 all through step 7. And it's one of my favorite chapters to deliver in this whole study. So